that these PowerPoint videos are on Canvas. But you'll see that when you open up a PowerPoint, you actually have to download it because it doesn't automatically open up on its own. So we're going to download this, and this is a continuation of the lesson that we began on Friday. So I would like you to pull out your notes from Wednesday. I would like you to pull out your notes from Wednesday with your definitions page. Those of you who are watching the video right now, pull out a sheet of notebook paper, write definitions on it, because we are going to be carrying forward with some key concepts starting with these. So on Wednesday, I clarified that English 105 is a course primarily in discipline of literature. English 101 is primarily a course in the discipline of linguistics, sentence structure, sentences, and paragraph coherence. But also, in English 101, we are addressing clarity. That you not only write sentences and paragraphs that are clear, but full papers that are clear with a thesis statement that is well organized and everything connects. And we introduce academic writing to you and research writing in English 101, but it's definitely an introduction. English 102 is within the discipline of rhetoric, which transcends clarity into effectiveness with our first definition, which we went over on Wednesday. Rhetoric is the art of effective communication. Then we moved into our next definition, persuasion, the attempt to influence an audience. Before we move to the next one, I'd like to ask all of you, how do people in our society persuade? Perhaps they're advertisers, perhaps they're presidential candidates making speeches asking for your vote, perhaps they're salespeople who want to sell you a car, perhaps they're your friend wanting you to agree with them on something or another. There are a lot of different reasons that we persuade, but what are some of the ways we persuade? And your name again?
Brian.
Brian.
I'd say the biggest, well, at least in like campaigns and stuff, the biggest one is putting down other people.
Criticizing.
Or, yeah. Putting someone or something in a bad light and spinning it to where yours is in a good light.
Very good point. You know what? If you don't have a case that's strong enough of your own, maybe you can just criticize the other guy. Make it look like the other guy isn't very good. And even though you're not very good either, maybe you're the lesser of two evils, right? Okay, John, what would you say is another example?
Like making promises.
Good.
Like
Promises.
cars.
You do this for me, then I'll do that for you. And is it Braden?
Yeah,
Yes, by appealing to their needs, wants, or concerns. In other words, recognizing what the audience wants, what the audience needs, and what the audience is concerned about. The more you are able to understand your audience, rhetoric actually is not only a field within language studies, it's also a field within psychology, because we need to understand our listeners in order to know how to communicate with them. So if we understand what their wants and needs are, and we try to meet them, that's part of communication. Laura, you had another one.
They like show the benefits of the choice. They want you
Right. They might make some kind of comparison contrast and show the benefits of theirs. Okay. Let's focus on advertisers. What are some of the other ways that advertisers in particular try to persuade us? John again.
I would say promises, but like a promise that this product will do this.
This product will do this. And so they want you to feel that that product is going to do something special for you. Anybody want to add to that? Braden.
Just like any advertisement, maybe it's a poster or something, you get aesthetically pleasing, but outside of sex,
Aesthetically pleasing, particularly sex even. Braden actually mentioned it, but I'm going to go out and say it. Sex is one of the ways that we persuade, particularly in advertising. And so we draw people to see things that we know are going to draw them in. But I want to come back to what John said about promises. A similar one is bribery. Is that a common one among? Yeah, a lot of advertisers, car salespeople, whatever it is, they try to bribe you. You give me this, I'll give you that. Okay. Any others that you can think of? Maggie.
Empathy or empathy.
sympathy, okay? And so we might see an advertisement with these kitties, with these great big eyes, big, huge eyes, and the kitty's in trouble, and we've got to go out and save that kitty. Okay, so that's appealing to our emotion, particularly our sympathy. Good. Any others? Guilt. Yeah. If they can make us feel guilty, then they might be able to draw us into their position. So some of these methods of persuasion are fairly manipulative. A gun is a form of persuasion. And so we have flattery, bribery, sex, violence, and all of these ways that various different people are trying to persuade us to get us to do what they want us to do. And now we are moving to another form of persuasion called argument. How would you all define argument before we get into what the text said about argument and what I'm going to say about argument? How would you all define argument based on your understanding of argument from society's perspective? Two sides trying to prove points. That's good.
Like I said, it's structured, arguably structured, way of communicating.
A structured method of communicating your opinion. Good. And then we're going to
Right.
Brian.
I'd say the struggle between two sides with like opposing viewpoints.
Good. The struggle between two sides with opposing viewpoints. And your name?
Yeah.
Matt.
I would think of it like a heated debate.
Yes.
Not very structured, just kind of
Right.
arguing, slamming stuff. You're stupid.
That's usually the way we think of argument, where it's two sides just in a heated, intense debate. I'm going to try to prove my side to you while you're trying to prove your side to me, and we are not getting anywhere. We are not really listening to each other because we are trying so hard to prove our point that we're not even hearing what the other has to say. And so that's our usual definition of argument. It usually has a negative connotation. And it's like a conflict, a debate, heated, I like that word. But that is not the definition of argument that we usually use in rhetorical studies. So now I'd like you all to pull out your texts, or in this case, your handouts, given that your text hasn't arrived yet. And we're going to take a look at how the text defines argument. And while you're doing that, I'll pull my own out. If you're watching the video, then we are referring to the chapter 1 of the Writing Arguments text. Okay. What did you notice from the text? What were some of the ways the text defined argument? Or some key features of argument according to the text? And if you're watching the video, you can go ahead and write down some of your own ideas about how the text defines argument. It says both what argument is not and what it is. You could answer either way. What are some of the ways that the text defines argument? What's that? It's not a debate, okay? And I want to say Braden, but you're Braden. Brian.
Creative and productive activity that engages at high levels of inquiry.
Good. It engages in inquiry. Good. Okay, let's keep going. What are some of the other ways the text defines argument? Logan.
It says argument is both a process and a product.
Good. It's not only a product, which we usually think of in argument. Usually we think when I win an argument, I gain the product of winning that argument through my strong explanations of my views. But the text says that it is also a process. What would you say is meant by that? How is argument a process? Logan again.
You go through the motions with it. So like, you know, if you're arguing about something, usually it leads to a lot of different things, and then you can branch off into different debates about it.
Good. You're going to be seeing multiple perspectives, okay? And John, what would
I
you
just
add to
wanted
that?
to say it like evolves, your argument evolves.
Your argument evolves. In what ways might it evolve? Connor?
It's almost like a, you have like hypotheses, almost. the
Hypothesis,
of
yeah.
this, and then you gotta prove that point, then the person has to decide whether that is factual or leave it or not.
So you might begin your argument paper, or in our case, your position paper, with a hypothesis. And it could be a hypothesis thesis statement. This is your working thesis statement where you think you might be going, but you need to investigate it to determine whether or not you really are going there. Do you think if argument is a process, your thesis statement that you wind up with by the time you turn in your paper might necessarily be the exact same working thesis statement you started with? No, why not?
As you find out more information about it, you might change your ideas about it.
Right, your opinion might evolve as you go along with it. Jordan, were you going to add something to the first question? No, okay. All right, any other elements that you noticed from the text about what argument is? Let's turn toward the back. It would probably be on your page about 12. Argument combines truth-seeking and persuasion. What do you see about the text's description of truth-seeking and persuasion? Actually, yeah, it's about your page 12. What is meant by either of those? We've already talked about persuasion. What about truth-seeking? What is meant by truth-seeking?
Unbiased facts.
Good. Unbiased facts. And John?
Best answer.
The best answer. And it really does get into, it's tricky to figure out whether there is a best answer, but there certainly is a better answer. Good. Any other thoughts? In truth-seeking, as opposed to in our traditional understanding of argument, where everything's one-sided, in truth-seeking, you're looking at multiple sides. Okay? Any other thoughts? Okay. Your photocopy did not come out very good. What I'd like you to do is turn to your page 15. And then, because your photocopy actually cut off some of the important material, I'm going to go ahead and read what the text has to say about truth-seeking on that last paragraph. So you can go to the second to last paragraph, coming into whether or not we have a right answer. Truth-seeking does not mean finding a right answer, but it doesn't mean a valueless relativism. You're looking for a best answer. Now I'm going to go ahead and read this first couple of sentences in the last paragraph for you because it cut out. To seek truth, then, means to seek the best or most just solution to a problem while observing all available evidence, listening with an open mind to the views of all stakeholders, clarifying and attempting to justify your own values and assumptions, and taking responsibility for your argument. It follows that truth-seeking often means delaying closure on an issue, acknowledging the pressure of alternative views, and being willing to change one's mind. How does that definition of argument that incorporates the idea of truth-seeking differ from our usual understanding of argument, which Matthew was saying was a heated debate? How is this different?
It's saying that you need to have evidence to support your opinion, and also be willing to accept that another person might be right as well.
Good. Remember to incorporate evidence and accept that the other person might have some valuable contributions as well. Good. Anybody else? You'll get another opportunity to answer this same question as you move forward. So you can add your next term to our definitions. So the definition of argument that we're going to work with is a form of persuasion that relies on truth-seeking and logical reasoning. So instead of defining argument the way our society does, which is a heated debate, where one person wins and the other person loses. We are defining argument as a form of persuasion that relies on truth-seeking and logical reasoning. So we don't have a winner. We have a process that involves logical reasoning and truth-seeking, where we're listening to each other and we're looking for the best possible solution. And this is essentially what you'll be doing with your position paper. You are going to be attempting to persuade, using truth-seeking and logical reasoning, a person who disagrees with a thesis statement that you've come up with, but I am imagining a reader who is open-minded, one who is willing to listen to your position, but you will still need to persuade somebody who believes differently than you do. From argument, we have two more terms, truth-seeking, which we've just defined from the text. Would anybody like to add any further ideas about what truth-seeking might be in addition to what the text said, or to add to what the text said? Complement? Okay, I think we spent enough time on it, so we're going to move to my definition of truth-seeking, which is research and discovery with an open mind. By the way, I do love the text's definition of truth-seeking, which I just read to you, but it's really long and hard to remember. So this is a definition that will work for you, that we can keep coming back to, that will be relevant to your papers. Research and discovery with an open mind. So when you write your position papers, you aren't just trying to prove your own point. You are engaging in research and discovery with an open mind. Any questions at this point? Okay, there's one more term that we'll need to review in order to complete our definition of argument, and that is logical reasoning. A systematic method of investigating the truth of a matter. This quarter, I will give you one systematic method. There are many, and in English 102, with so much for us to do, we don't really have time this quarter to discuss more than one systematic method. But I will give you one in the middle of the quarter that you will use to investigate the truth of the matter. Okay, now at this point, do any of you have any questions or thoughts to continue our discussion about any of these concepts? Any questions or other thoughts? Okay, now I'm moving to my transitionary thought, which, by the way, won't be on the PowerPoint that you can see on Canvas. It's really designed for those of you watching this video, but I'd like to hear it from you all as well. Our transition thought is, how might our definition of argument impact the way you write your argument papers? Now, I'd like all of you to be thinking about it right now. Those of you watching the video, just pause the video right now and write down your own answer. Right now, how might our definition of argument impact the ways you write your own papers? Just pause the video, write down your own answer, and then we're going to hear what everybody else has to say. Now that I've given you all a moment to think about it, what might you say? Now, no, you're Matt. You're Braden.
So make sure you incorporate the inputs of what you think are doing it.
This is really key. If you don't acknowledge the other side of the argument, what is going to happen with your ability to persuade? So Braden was saying, you need to acknowledge the other side's point of view. If you don't do that, how will that impact your persuasion?
It'll be weak,
Yeah, why?
because the readers will think that you don't understand what the other side is, which means you're not open-minded.
The readers will see that you don't sound open-minded, and they're not going to trust you. John, what would you
I
say?
would just say, if me as a reader, why would I listen to it if they're not listening to my side?
Exactly. Why should I, as a reader, listen to you if you're not listening to me? And in fact, they might not even get through your paper because you haven't acknowledged their side. Good. Anybody else? There will be a group presentation, by the way, during this quarter on organizing your paper for an audience who disagrees with you. You've already been trained in the classical organizational style in high school, I hope. where you give your introduction and you put your thesis statement in your introduction and you give your reasons for why you believe what you believe, and then you explain what the other side believes and you rebut the other side and you conclude. What I'm going to recommend is that you put the other side first before you describe your own views. How do you think that might impact your persuasion? Patience.
So just including the other side improves your ability to make your own argument, because if you understand, you have to look at both sides of an issue to see the truth. We already kind of talked about this. So even if you disagree, acknowledging the other side will help you see the issue as a whole clearly, and therefore present your own side more coherently.
Good. If you acknowledge the other side, it demonstrates that you've heard them and you've done your research, and it also sets the context for where you're going. Good. Anybody else want to add to that? Why put the other side first? And you're again, Caleb.
Because if you put the other side first, especially if the reader agrees with that side more than your position, it kind of undermines the points that they believe in and kind of makes them second guess themselves, and then you follow up with, oh, by the way, this is what I'm trying to say.
You know what? In some ways it can be tricky. So in your introduction, you might withhold your thesis statement. Just put in your research question. Don't even let your reader know what your thesis statement is. Argue the other side. They think you're with them because they know the classical organizational style where you describe your own views first. They think you're with them and you're arguing their side, and then you start to rebut your side. And then you go to the other position, your side. But now you've hooked them. You've got them so they're reading your argument. Good. All right. Any other thoughts on that? Okay, I'm going to go back to this question again. In addition to including the other side, and potentially even including the other side first, how might our definition of argument impact the ways that you write your papers? Any other thoughts? That argument is a process of truth-seeking, research and discovery with an open mind. How else might that impact the way you write your papers? Are you going to be writing your position paper the night before even the draft is due, let alone the paper is due? Why not?
You need to research.
You need to do your research. Why else? Maura?
You need to have like time to think about it, like so your opinion might be able to change before you write it too.
This is really key. Maura is saying that you need time to think about it, consider it, and be a truth seeker in case your position evolves. I love that word that John used, evolves along the way. Good. Any other thoughts? Furthermore, you might have a better understanding of where your reader is coming from. Logan was saying that one of the most important points is to bring in the other side. Was that you who said that? Or was that somebody else? Okay, you were bouncing off maybe Braden or Matt. So one of you was saying that you need to bring in the other side. Once you research with an open mind the other side, that might help your opinion evolve as well. And so that might modify where you're going with it. You might start with a very clear yes-no answer to your research question. I definitely believe this. Then you start researching the other side, and you think, okay, I believe this with a qualifier, which you'll learn later. It's one of the terms we'll go over later. Under these circumstances, I only believe this under these circumstances because now I've heard your point and I see where you're coming from. And then you'll need the time to incorporate those qualifiers. Any other thoughts? Okay. Well, then at this point, what I'd like you to do is be thinking about this in light of some of my policies, particularly my draft policy. So you can pull out your course pack right now and refer to page 2, the obvious draft policy and the draft penalty. Just go ahead and review that right now. Those of you watching the video, just pull out your syllabus. We're on page 2. Review those as well. If you don't have your course pack yet, you have until Wednesday, and on Wednesday I'm going to have you hold it up. And if you need to look on with a partner right now, just let your partner know you don't have it yet, you need to look on. Take a look at the draft policy and the draft penalty while I turn this off, and then we'll go over it together. as a form of persuasion that relies on truth-seeking and logical reasoning. I want to see your process of truth-seeking and logical reasoning. The text even demonstrates that it defines argument not only as a product, but also as a process. So part of your work in this class is to demonstrate the process of your development of your arguments. So I'm going to go ahead and read the obvious draft policy, and then we'll go from there. An obvious draft shows more than just editing of the grammar or additional paragraphs, but clear revision of what you have learned based on your research and thinking process. This includes different examples, better quotes to emphasize a point, a more intriguing introduction, a revised conclusion to give more food for thought, reorganization of ideas based on purpose or audience, a modified point, and so forth. Demonstrate that you have thought about your topic thoroughly and therefore have engaged in a genuine mind-developing process of research and writing. So for every paper you turn in, you'll need to include an obvious draft that shows revision, more than just editing your sentences, more than just adding paragraphs. So for those of you who do all your drafting on the computer, every now and then print out a draft so that you can demonstrate that process. If you take notes along the way, you can include those. And so that allows you to demonstrate that you really have been engaging in that process. So then the next point is the draft penalty. Make sure that you print one out. Your paper won't be graded without an obvious draft, and the request comes with a 10% penalty. But if you produce it quickly without complaint, shows genuine revision, that penalty will be cut in half. So every time you turn in a paper, you'll submit the final paper by Canvas electronically, and you'll submit a hard copy. And included with the hard copy needs to be some kind of obvious draft that demonstrates you have engaged in that process, because I want to see that you are really thinking, but also that you are utilizing some of the techniques that I'll be teaching. So this quarter, starting on Wednesday, in fact, we are going to be going over a whole series of different ways for you to move from clarity to effectiveness, for you to move from just clearly explaining your ideas and developing them with persuasion, particularly persuasion of those who believe differently than you do. If your position paper is designed for a reader who takes the opposite thesis statement as you do, what are some of the challenges that you'll face as a writer? How will it be harder than if you are arguing from the class to the choir?
You have to be open-minded to their side.
You have to be open-minded to their side and argue their side. You have to get them to want to read your paper. Why are they not going to want to read your paper? Are they going to want to read your paper? Usually, no. Why not?
Goes against your opinion.
Goes against your opinion, they're not going to want to read your paper. So you need to encourage them to read your paper. What are some ways you can think of right now, before I even start teaching them, what are some ways you can think of right now that might encourage them to read your paper when they don't want to?
We have more in common than you think.
Establishing common ground. We're going to be talking about that. Establishing the ways in which you already agree. Good. Any other ways you can encourage them to read your paper when they're not going to want to read it because it goes against what they think?
Talk about the good points of their opinion.
Extol their idea. Praise their idea. Believe it or not, we're going to be getting into that. If you can actually argue their idea well, you're going to be persuasive. And I'm going to hold off on that until the lesson where we discuss that. We'll be thinking about it. All right? Any other thoughts?
Well, just like make sure that you're knowledgeable of their opinions, that you can express like how they're thinking about it.
Good.
Like, super good.
Respect their opinion and express it well.
Guilt trip them.
Guilt trip them. We'll be talking about that. Okay. Any other thoughts?
Criticize your own criticism first.
Criticize your own criticism so that you've heard their rebuttals of yours, and then you bring those in as well. Any other thoughts? How about entertain them? What are some of the ways you can entertain them? What's that?
Comic relief.
Comic relief, humor. Yes, we'll be talking about humor this quarter. Any other thoughts? How can you entertain them?
Your own weaknesses nuances, flaws, etc. and humorous way.
Tease yourself, exactly. Which does two things. It establishes humor and intimacy, another key idea we're going to be talking about this quarter. So far we've got the common ground, intimacy, humor. Any other thoughts?
Suspense.
Suspense, we're going to be talking about suspense. Good. Any others? Poetic style, we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about a lot of different ways that you can engage your reader so that your reader knows you've heard them, and so that your reader is potentially even entertained. So maybe your reader doesn't really want to hear what you have to say, but because you say it so well, they're reading your paper. And that's part of what revision is. Moving from clarity, which is a C, to engaging your reader so they want to read what you have to say, even though they don't want to, that's an A. We live in a day of information overload. How many of you have read all the materials that your instructors required you to read last quarter? Okay, I have one star student in this class. The rest of you are like the rest of us, including me as a student myself. No, most of us don't read everything that we're required to read, let alone everything we're not required to read. Why is that? It's too much. We're lazy. We're not interested.
You don't expect that much more information to be helpful?
We don't expect all that information to be helpful. All of those reasons and more are why we don't read everything we're even required to read, let alone what we're not required to read. And the reality is that most of you, once you graduate from college and you are writing and speaking in society, you'll be writing materials that people don't have to read. And if you're not even reading what you have to read, how can you expect them to read what they don't have to read in this day of information overload? What I want to teach you this quarter is to write in such a way that people will want to hear what you have to say. I want you all to rise into voices of power for the sake of good. You can see that on my syllabus. That is one of my goals for you. And it's not easy. So I want to up the ante from clarity into effectiveness so that you can be voices of power. Some of the techniques I'm going to be teaching you this quarter are used for both good and for evil, which is why I add voices of power for the sake of good. I want you to tap into these techniques so that you can go from this course and become a writer and a speaker who moves our world forward in a positive way. All right, so that's part of the reason I have those draft policies. Now let's turn to the beginning of the syllabus, and we're going to go from the beginning. You can see in my introductory thoughts, I want you to rise into a voice of power for the sake of good. You can see the text, attendance and participation. You have, you can be absent 3 times. However, if you are absent, make sure to contact a classmate. Find out from your classmate what you missed before you contact me. Unless you want to just send me an email and just say, I'm sick, that's fine. I probably won't respond, but at least I've heard you. But contact a classmate, find out what you've missed. And then if you have any questions, you can contact me. And what's more important than your attendance is your participation. So go ahead and read what is required of participation. And then notice that good attendance and participation are required for our privileges for some of what I offer to you. So they're privileges, they're not rights. So you can see that privileges such as the 4 p.m. grace period, the late day revisions, bonus points, drafts reviewed by me, etc., they are privileges for good attendance and participation. You will also receive 30 points for your participation score, much of which takes place right here in the classroom. How well you participate in our discussions and respond respectfully to your classmates. But part of it is on the work that you do outside of this class, particularly on your drafts for your position papers. So if you include more than just one draft in your position paper, that's great. Or for your papers, all your papers. You're not required to, but if you show that you've done a lot of work, that is really going to reflect well on your participation score. But all I'm really looking for is just one draft. Extended papers, I'd like you to read that on your own. We will be writing 3 papers in this class. And winter quarter, that's an evaluation, a position, and a proposal. Spring quarter is a synthesis position and evaluation. Make sure that you submit your final paper by Canvas, but that you also submit hard copies. And I will probably grade by hard copy because I have eyes of paradox. A far-sighted eye and a nearsighted eye. They're just kind of weird, and I don't have good glasses for the computer. So you'll also submit a hard copy with your obvious draft and other materials. Any questions on any of that? Okay, we'll move back to page 2. You'll notice that I follow the English department's outcomes for grading. A paper that does the job is a C. It meets the standard. But how many of you want to go the extra mile for a B or the extra 2 miles for an A? Raise your hands. Good. I want you all to want A's. I want you to try for the A's. I want you to try not just for clarity, but for effectiveness, for persuasion, for a voice of power. And so let me share with you how I've designed my course pack so that you can earn that A. The very first page of any assignment just goes over the assignment itself, what you need to do to meet the standard. That's the C. But if you want an A or a B, I always have another page, the tips page, which goes over various different strategies that you can use to go the extra mile or two. After that, I have a rubric, which you will turn in with your hard copies because I will actually put your score right on your rubric right there. And the level 5s give you an idea of what you need to do to go for the A level. It's not easy, exactly. In fact, to give you an idea, under clarity, let's see, we're going to do analysis. Now we're going to do, we'll do analysis on page 22. The level 3 is analysis of the pieces provided, context is provided, and an introduction. But the level 5 is the value, criteria, and support are analyzed with thought-provoking insights. Both the introduction and the conclusion encourage the reader to ponder. The level 5 for clarity is language is stylistically engaging, voices welcoming, and grammatical conventions are followed, organization is clear. That's probably not as good as my position paper one, which I think I'm going to move to right now. Here we go. On page 44, for your position paper, the level 5 for engaging read is engages reader with a captivating introduction, leaves them pondering with an intriguing conclusion, and provides appropriate rhetorical, stylistic, and poetic techniques for interest, whereas the level 3 is clarity is maintained. So you can see, as Connor says, it's not easy to earn 5, but you can. The other ways that you can learn how to do that are to take the workshop materials seriously and to review the student samples. So for every paper that I assign, I include 1 or 2 student samples from a previous student who did the same or similar assignment and received an A or an A-. Any questions on that? We are almost done. Late papers, you have 2 days after the paper is due to turn in your paper, but I won't take the paper after that. So if a paper is due on Friday, you can turn it in on Monday for a 10% penalty, but I won't take it after Monday because we do have the draft day, then we have a bonus day, then we have the regular day, then we have the late day. I give you a week and a half and so even if you have an emergency, the late deadline should cover you. But guess what? If you don't have your paper done by class time on the day it's due, as long as you come to class, you have until 4 o'clock to turn it in without a penalty. But the key is you need to come to class. The reason I have the 4 p.m. grace period is because I don't want you realizing 10 minutes before class is due that your printer needs new ink. And then you skip my class or come late to my class because you need to go out and get new ink. I want you to come to class. So you have until 4 o'clock to turn it in, even by Canvas, and then you can turn in the hard copies later. How many of you are organized and like to earn bonus points? Some of you are going to really appreciate the next policy. You can earn a 5% bonus for turning your papers in early. So after the draft deadline day, the next class period will be the bonus day, and you can turn your paper in that day for 5% bonus points as long as you meet these guidelines. You have good attendance and participation. You have all materials and minimum page and source requirements. Your draft more than barely passes the obvious draft policy. Here's a little whisper to you. Even if you just revise that introduction that originally had your thesis statement, and you decide to put your thesis statement later and just close your introduction with your research question to get your reader thinking about it, even that passes my draft policy. It is not hard to pass my draft policy. But if you want bonus points, don't just barely pass it. Show that you've really worked on it. Try to get at least a B. In other words, work hard on it, and submit both submissions to Canvas and to hard copy. That's what you'll need to do for the bonus. If you turn in all 3 bonus papers, you should have your grade bumped up a third of a grade automatically. And if it doesn't happen automatically, I will bump it for you. So take a look at the extra bonus too. Okay, any questions so far? Peer workshops and conferences. Before every paper is due, you will be swapping your paper with a partner, and your partner will review it for how well you are meeting the guidelines. Then you'll review your paper for yourself too, and fill out those workshops. If you want me to review a copy of your draft, then you can see what you need to do right here. You need to bring it to my office, LNL 406, or the secretary, LNL 423. Bring it to my office during my office hour, which is at 10 a.m., and then I'll look at it before I teach my classes. And then I'll meet with you during the class. If you don't have a copy to my office, you can bring a second copy to class and hope that I have time to skim it. But I might not have time to skim it. I might have had 7 students bring a copy to my office, and then I've got to meet with some of those students outside of class because I can't meet with 7 students in a class period. So I might not be able to even skim it. But maybe only 2 students brought a copy, and you brought a second copy to class. Maybe I might have time to skim it. But if you don't bring a second copy to class, I wouldn't have time to review it.
We can go to the writing center.
But you can go to the Writing Center. Exactly. That's one of the bullets on here. You can meet with me the next office hour. That's one of the bonus points. I mean, the other bullet. So I've got other ideas, including the Writing Center. All right. Any questions on anything on this syllabus? All we have left are revisions, plagiarisms, and students with disabilities. I'm just going to have you read that on your phone. No closing questions? Okay, Patrick, thank you.